Welcome to the March 2022 Adaptive Cards Community Call. We have a lot for today's community call. We're going to start off with Fabio, a valued member of our community, a Microsoft MVP, who's going to present his Adaptive Cards host control in the Microsoft PnP Library. Then we will have Will go ahead and show off a community contribution or an internal team contribution as well for a device emulator on our Adaptive Cards Designer, which is super cool. And then we can go ahead and end the session with a Q&A as always. We're going to start off with the Adaptive Cards host control, and I will pass on control to Fabio. Fabio, you can go ahead and start sharing your screen.
Okay. Let me share my screen. So thank you to having me this community call. So I want to show you some information about this control, the Adaptive Card host control for the Microsoft PnP Library. So the agenda, it's this one. First of all, I want to show you and talk about the reason behind the implementation of this control and why I choose to use the Adaptive Card SDK. Then I'll show you just an introduction of the control, how it's implemented, and how to use inside the Sharepoint framework. Of course, I'll show you a simple demo and the code of the control. And in the last part, I'll show you what is the next steps about this control and next controls that we'll implement inside the same the PnP React library. So, first of all, what is the reason behind this control? In my career, I work with a lot of customers that want to implement internet in SharePoint by using the SharePoint framework. And very often, this customer asks me, so the same identical functionality as on a web part, but want to have a different UI. For example, one customer wants the button and the text box or a different control in a specific layout, but different customers want to change the layout. So this led me to think about the possibility to change the UI without recompile the SharePoint framework solution. And after several attempts, try to use different frameworks, the choice for me is to use Adaptive Card. Why I choose the Adaptive Card SDK? So you already know that Adaptive Card, it's a great framework, great implementation, and a way to implement UI because it's portable, it's open, is expressive, and for me, the good reason is that it's automatically styled. You know that the style is updated by the host application and not by the user that create the UI by using the JSON format. And this is the reason why I choose the Adaptive Card SDK. So I create this control as a React control. And this control is medium complex because implement a lot of things. For example, internally, use the SDK to take the card payload and render the Adaptive Card inside a specific element of the web part. This control automatically apply if an object data is passed to the control, automatically apply the template. So take the template by the card and then expand the template by using the object data in automatically way. Implement, of course, some callbacks to intercept action and errors. For example, if you click some action buttons, we are able to intercept this action and then write the code to do something. And it's think to be extended in a way by create custom elements and create custom action. And there are two callbacks to set to register inside of the Adaptive Card SDK new card elements and new actions. Of course, another callback is used to register the custom property inside the host capability of the adaptive card, basically by using a key and a value. And in this implementation, because I want to have a very deep integration from the adaptive card to the context of the Sharepoint framework, I implemented almost all the elements and all the action that now it's implemented inside the adaptive card 1.5 by using the Fluent UI controls. So you know that we have it's possible to use an already created package that implements the Fluent UI elements created by Microsoft, but I'm trying to use with the last version of the SDK 1.5, but there are some problems to use this Fluent UI implementation. And another things, there are no a deep integration with Sharepoint framework. For example, when I show you in the demo, when you try to change the background of the section inside the page. By creating the new set of elements, I'm able to manage directly this thing, and then I'm able to pass the current Sharepoint section theme to the Fluent UI elements, and then render in an integrated way with Sharepoint. Now I want to show you first the demo, and then I show you the code. The demo is implemented in two parts. The first part is use this web part, demo web part inside a Sharepoint page, and the same web part used inside a Teams as Teams tab. So let me share my browser. So first of all, this is a Sharepoint workbench. Of course, behind this, I have a Sharepoint Framework solution that contains a web part that hosts my adaptive card host control. And this web part, it's very simple because take a lot of JSON adaptive card samples, and when you try to change this property, you are able to change the card and then show what is the result inside the web part. The good integration that I already mentioned, it's, let me go on a complex card like, okay, it is this. If I try to change the background section, I'm able to change the color of all controls. Of course, the basic background, the text, but it's the same for the action button, for example. And another thing is I'm able to change the theme applied to this web part. For example, I want to use the Sharepoint theme, okay, and this is the theme that I take from the section. But I'm able to use different theme, for example, the theme for Teams, default, Teams dark, or Teams contrast. Okay, in which way I implemented this component, this control? So let me show you the code. First of all, this is the simple web part that use basically the adaptive card host demo React component. And I pass some parameters like the theme, what is the sample that I selected from the dropdown, and the theme name that come from basically from the same dropdown of the theme, if I want to use a Sharepoint or different Teams theme. And inside the adaptive card host demo React component, I have the core component that is the adaptive card host. You see that we have a lot of properties. The card, it's the payload of the adaptive card, the data object. If we want to apply the classic CSS property as a React property for the component, if you want to apply some CSS class name to the component, this property is used to pass the Fluent UI theme. I have a property to pass the host config. You know that inside the adaptive card SDK, you are able, in JavaScript, you're able to pass the host config to add more properties, and some callbacks. For example, the invoke action And by using this action object, we are able to take all the property for submit action or different action that we have inside the adaptive card. And a callback for the errors. For example, if there are some problems to render the adaptive card, we are able to catch the errors and then show, for example, a message to the user. 2 callbacks for the elements and action to register by using this object register, card object registry for the card element and the action, and a way to update the host capability to pass custom properties. For example, if you custom elements or custom action need some properties that come from your web part, you are able to use this host capability set custom property, and then inside your custom elements, you are able to read this custom property and then use inside this control. And there are another strange, for me, property is unique controlling page. This is used in a specific case. Let me show what is the sample. Let me change comment. Okay, in this case, when we have the action as implemented, the secondary action, and we have the possibility to click to this button to see the secondary action, this menu, it's inside the adaptive card SDK, it's rendered at the body level. And this is a problem inside the Sharepoint page because we are not able to style with the custom theme property this menu. And in this case, if we use more instance of this web part, let me show you this is the order confirmation. Okay. If I try to, I have to put inside a different section. If I try to change this one, okay, you are able to see that we have different colors. So we have the colors applied to this one, but it's the same color here. By using this property, the developer needed to understand if it's possible to have only a unique control inside the page, or it's possible to have more than one control inside the same page. And then this control inside the implementation are able to set different CSS custom variables to apply different colors, and then understand if we have to apply the section colors or maintain the default colors as the default colors for this menu. This is the only, this property is present only to resolve this problem.
Hey, Fabio?
Yeah.
Just ping me after this, because I believe there's a solution for this also that does not necessarily, but I need to understand more about your implementation.
Yeah.
But there should be a solution for this.
Okay, thank you. So I want to show you very quickly the same web part as on a tab. This is a different example. Basically, I exposed this web part as a team personal app and teams tab, okay? And this is, if you try to change the settings, you are able to see that I'm able to change the same configuration, okay? And it's very cool because by the web part, I implemented a little logic. And if I try to change the colors, okay, I'm able to change the colors from themes and then apply a similar representation of the colors inside the same web part and the same controls. Of course, you know that teams use Fluent UI React Northstar, not the same of the Sharepoint framework inside Sharepoint. I use not the Northstar implementation, but the Fluent UI React controls. And the theme that I apply, it's generated by using the colors that team use for the 3 versions of the teams that teams have. So let me show quickly the code. Okay. So this is the implementation of the controls. It's a React control implemented as a function controls that use a lot of React hooks, and basically have the properties with all the properties that I already show. And then there are some code to manage the properties, but the core, it's this one. Let me show you. The core, it's this one. And I use the adaptive card SDK to parse the payload, to apply, to expand with the context that implement the data that you want to render inside your card. And then by using the theme provider, I'm able to apply the Sharepoint framework, so the Fluent UI theme inside the adaptive card that I want to render. But the very implementation, the very part of this implementation, it's the elements that I already re-implemented, basically by take the source code of each choice set input and all the elements that we have, and then inside the internal render with some code, so we don't have too much time to explain all the code inside this control, of course. I use the React Fluent UI component to render the checkbox, the button for the actions, and basically for all the action and all the elements inside the adaptive card 1.5. So, some few slides. What is the next steps? So the next steps is to, of course, evolve these controls. So I and Joao Mendes, that is present inside this call, talked about the design of this control and how to implement this control and how to extend this control. So we have to extend and implement more functionality for this specific control, but we want to create more controls. For example, I started to create the designer component for the PnP reusable React control to host inside a Sharepoint Framework solution, the designer. Basically, the reason is, okay, I have the controls to render an adaptive card, but I want to have the controls to show the designer to have the possibility to design the adaptive card, save this card, and then render inside the web part. And then the next step is to create a set of new adaptive card elements, of course, only for the JS SDK, not for different implementations, by using maybe the Fluent UI React library or React Northstar, or maybe by using the Fluent UI web components, because the Fluent UI web components have very interesting components that we can put inside this implementation. And maybe, but about this we have to talk with Joao, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. We talk about how to extend these host controls to help Joao to implement in a good way the elements that implement the Microsoft Graph Toolkit elements, or maybe by using another libraries. In this slide, you can find some references. The first link is the page of the PnP reusable React controls specific for the adaptive card host. It's of course the code is already published inside GitHub. You can find inside this repo, and the demo that I just show you will be available inside the repository of the Sharepoint Framework, the PnP Sharepoint Framework web parts samples. And at the end, if you want to contact me, I repeat, I'm Fabio. I'm the CEO of the Apvee Solutions. It's a startup that has the objective to create a solution for the Microsoft 365 platform. And I'm Microsoft MVP in two categories, the business application and office development category. So if you want to send me an email or follow me on Twitter or contact me by LinkedIn, you can find all the information you see in this slide. So thank you. And of course, if you have a question, I'm here to respond to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fabio. And I went ahead and pasted all of the links about Fabio and his work in the chat for anyone to quickly reference there. Thank you so much for sharing that. We'll save the questions for the end of the presentation. I'll go ahead and share my screen again. All right, and next up we have Will, who will be presenting the new designer Device Emulator that was recently merged into our repository. Will, do you want to go ahead and share your screen for this?
Sure, let me go ahead and start that. I'm a UX engineer with Teams Platform. I help to coordinate with the Adaptive Cards folks this feature here, Emulate Device. I think this will hit the designer. I'm not sure what the package release schedule is looking like, but if you host your own Adaptive Cards designer, it's already in main of the Adaptive Cards designer package. Basically, it's just a way to start looking at how Adaptive Cards will present on narrower viewports. So it's a really simple feature. Basically, this is emulating what an adaptive card will look like on certain widths. By default, there's the unconstrained width, and we've added some pretty simple categories. Small mobile, this includes the WCAG 1.4.10 standard 320 pixels. Large mobile, 414 is reasonably popular. Small tablets, these are all fairly popular resolutions that users would ostensibly, like a large number of users might ostensibly have. I'm hoping this helps folks design cards for mobile experiences. And if you host your own designer, you can add your own configurations as you like. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Will, for that. This is awesome. It'll allow people to create cards for mobile in a much better way. So this is a very valuable contribution. Thank you so much to you and your team for contributing that to our repo.
Likewise, thank you for collaborating.
No problem at all.
JP, I see you shared a link to the custom build that he had, so people can play with that. And then
Yes.
We don't have a timeline on when we get it on adaptivecards.io. Is that right?
Yes, hopefully soon. We don't have a fixed timeline yet, but we are looking to have that soon in our main build of the Adaptive Cards website.
Cool. So yeah, check the link out, folks, that JP put in the chat if you want to play with it or give any feedback.
Right. Another announcement here is we have the Teams Nation Community Conference on Wednesday, March 23rd. We have 3 of our valuable community members as well, Tim, Tomas, who was here 2 months ago, and Luis, who will be presenting during this conference about adaptive cards today. You can register at the link at the bottom, teamsnation.rocks/register. This is a completely community-driven conference, so it's awesome to see members of our community presenting at this. Please show your support during this conference. I know I will be attending and learning about adaptive cards today in Teams. It's rare to see something like the Adaptive Cards Avengers get together and do a presentation like this. So I'll send a link to this in the chat for people to register and attend the conference. Remember, it's a completely community-driven conference, and excited to see all the work that has been put into this talk. We can go ahead and jump to our Q&A section. Feel free to go off mute or just type your questions in the chat. Is that a question for Fabio, if you're still in the call? Could you talk more about the Sharepoint framework and what it's used for?
Yeah, so the Sharepoint, let me share you my screen again. So the Sharepoint framework is an incredible way for me to implement customization, not only for Sharepoint, but for Teams, and in the future for different services inside the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So basically, it's a client-side way to create code, normally by using the TypeScript, and then compile it to JavaScript to create not only web parts. You know that the web parts, it's component that you can put inside a SharePoint page, but you can create a different kind of extensibility for SharePoint, for example, like application customizer, field customizer for lists, and different kind of web part, new type of the web part by using adaptive card. The name is ACE, adaptive card extension. So basically, the compilation of this solution creates a package that you are able to deploy inside SharePoint, and then if you want, you can deploy inside the Teams, and then use the same web part in SharePoint or Teams. If I have time to add some things, why, if it's already present a way to use adaptive card, the ACE adaptive card extension, why I implemented this kind of control for the web part? Because the adaptive card extension web part have a specific model designed for a specific scenario. But by implementing this control, you are able to use these controls, the adaptive card host, inside a web part, or, for example, inside an application customizer. I have a plan to create a demo by using this adaptive card host inside an application customizer. I don't have an example, but let me show just on a simple page. With an application customizer, you are able to create a component to implement, for example, a custom header inside a SharePoint page. So by using this adaptive card host control inside an application extension, you are able to design the UI of this extension by using the adaptive card. And then save the payload of the card, for example, inside a SharePoint list or library, and then change a runtime payload, reload the page, and apply this new UI without recompile anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that explanation, Fabio. We have another question in the chat from Chris asking, when/will Power Automate support replacing adaptive cards in Teams messages? Chris, I don't have the answer to your question right now. It looks like Matt will be trying to get an answer for that in the near time frame here. What I do know is that recently Power Automate has announced support for adaptive cards in Power Automate Desktop. So I went ahead and shared a link to the blog post that was announced last month. So it's a fairly recent update. You can go ahead and play around with that. We have another question here for Fabio from Carlos asking, so how do we get started using reactive cards for the SharePoint framework? They sent a link to GitHub and said, create using this, and then add the controls via the documentation on GitHub. Fabio, can you get into some more details on that?
Yeah, let me share again the screen. And okay, so inside the link that I share with you, you are able to find the page that describes this adaptive card host control is inside the PnP SharePoint Framework controls, React controls. Basically, inside your solution, you have to, first of all, install the library as a NPM package, of course. And then you can click on the adaptive card host page. And then inside this page, it's presented a description of these controls and how to use. Basically, inside your React component, you are able to import some classes that are present for as implementation of these controls. And then there are some examples. So the basically required properties, the card object, the invoke action, and the error callback. And this is the same example, but with all the properties that you can set for these controls. And then different controls to how to use directly the SharePoint theme or different, for example, the Teams theme, Teams Dark, high contrast, and all the description for all the properties of the controls. So it's very simple to use. Just install the library, import the adaptive card host class and then write the React code to specify all the properties that you want to use. It's very simple. Yeah, I have another thing to add. At this moment, there are no deeply integration with the Sharepoint framework, but we have a plan with Yoao to add another properties. One property is the context of the Sharepoint for the web part or in general for the Sharepoint is context, because we need to inject a runtime some context property that come from the Sharepoint framework to use in the future implementation of the new elements or action that need to have a deep integration with Sharepoint framework. So in the future, we'll add more properties, but at this moment, you can use this description inside this page.
Thank you, Fabio, again. We have another question from Brad asking, do you have an ETA for 1.6? I'm assuming this is for adaptive cards schema version 1.6. And unfortunately, we don't have an ETA just yet. We are really hoping to get it out by the first half of 2022. Right now, our team is very focused on our accessibility story and making sure that our product is very accessible to all kinds of users. We've been fixing any accessibility bugs that we've found in our repo and really making sure that adaptive cards is accessible to all kinds of users. So this has delayed the release a little bit, but we are still shooting for first half of 2022 to get version 1.6 out. Currently, the first feature that has rolled out for version 1.6 is a horizontal carousel control. You can find that one on our repo. It's on our designer as well when you switch to version 1.6. It's not quite out for the drag and drop functionality, but the carousel still works as you would expect a horizontal carousel to work. We have a question from, I really hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, eConj, asking, I am a newbie developing Teams apps with React. Which React library should I be using? React Northstar or React Teams or Fluent UI?
I can probably help answer that. And
yes, thank you so much, Will.
I did in chat. React Teams is just more abstract component library that's built on top of React Northstar. There are, depending on like what your design system or like what features you want to roll out with your app, React Teams might not have the flexibility or all the components that you would need, so you can just use React Northstar. There are Teams themes that you can use there. There's also the upcoming Fluent UI React components, which makes improvements on all of the Fluent implementations that came before it. I'd highly recommend using that if you're able to take a dependency on something that's about to be released, but not there just yet. It's just got a lot of good stuff in there. I'll post a link to that as well.
All right, thanks. It's just that it's so confusing for a newbie because Teams documentation refers to React Teams link, the link button over there. And the samples use React Northstar. And for a newbie, it's really confusing. What is the go-to way, kind of?
I hear you. It's a situation that we're definitely working on improving.
Sure, thanks. Please share the link. Thanks.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, Ekansh, for the question. Looks like we're caught up on chat. Is there anyone that wants to go off mute and maybe ask a question through the mic?
I had a quick question. So in terms of the SharePoint, what Fabio was going over, right now we do something kind of similar, but it's just based on the sample in like the JavaScript SDK for like lighting up the fabric or components with Fluent UI. What's the difference, I guess? Like what's the benefit of using that library that Fabio made?
So the benefit to use this library is just to implement the UI not in React or different framework, by implementing the UI by using the adaptive card. This is the only, the only reason to use this control. If you want to use React, if you want to use different kind of React library for the UI, or for example, Angular or different framework, you are able to do in Sharepoint Framework. But I already mentioned inside the first slide, the reason why I choose to use the adaptive card is a specific situation when I need to change the UI without recompile the solution, because I want the scenario could be I want to have the possibility for my customer to change the layout by yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I think I misspoke. So basically, we're doing somewhat similar. So we take the so in the adaptive card SDK, like the JavaScript SDK, you can render a card in Sharepoint Framework, and then there's in the documentation there's like a little section on how to integrate in the Fluent UI stuff. So we're basically just doing that, and then the theming you can update like the host config with some of the themes pulled in from like the SharePoint environment. So I guess that's what we're currently kind of doing. So would this, I guess, what are the advantages of your library over doing that?
Okay, the advantages is this control do all this stuff by just to configure some properties. And the second important thing is that this control implement, sorry for that, in a better way, the integration with the Fluent UI and adaptive card element. For example, if you try to use the default library Fluent UI elements for adaptive card, these elements are not able to change the color based on the color section applied inside the page. And by using these controls, you are able to adapt the colors, adapt all related to the theme applied to the page or to the section page in SharePoint, or in Teams, of course. I don't use the Fluent UI Northstar. I use the Fluent UI, and I created the 3 different Fluent UI theme. One for the default theme, one for the dark, and one for the high contrast. And I'm able to apply with the theme type as a property of the adaptive card host, the correct theme to all the elements and action of the adaptive card. So this is I think the best part of this control, because you already mentioned that you are able to use it directly in React or in SharePoint Framework directly the SDK. Yeah, of course. This control implements a lot of things, and the most complicated part is the elements and action integrated with the Fluent UI.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
Thanks for that question, Greg, and thank you, Fabio, for the answer. Do we have anyone else that has a question? Awesome. I think we can go ahead and call it right there. Let me share my screen for the last remaining slides of the presentation. Here you can learn more about the Adaptive Cards product, as well as our roadmap, our repo, and also find tools and sample cards on madewithcards.io. Here you can learn more about the Microsoft 365 developer community calls like this one and their cadence. You can have all of the calls and all of their links in aka.ms/m365pnp. And this will conclude the March 2022 Adaptive Cards community call. Thank you so much, Fabio, for showing your SharePoint Framework solution. Thank you so much, Will, for demonstrating that designer device emulator. Make sure to please sign up for the Teams Nation Community Conference Wednesday, March 23rd. The link has been shared in the chat. And thank you all for attending.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, JP.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Fabio and Will.